The revolution began not with a bang, but with a whisper that no one heard. By the year 2086, speaking aloud had become inefficient. Voices were slow, flawed, emotional. Misunderstandings were rampant in the era of constant digital interaction. That's when Neuralink was introduced, not just a device, but a complete neural mesh implanted in the human brain at birth. It translated thoughts into clean, direct messages beamed from one mind to another. No noise, no delay, no deception. Within a decade, classrooms fell silent. Children learned in perfect sync with educational aides whispering equations and history directly into their minds. Arguments dissolved. Why shout when you could transmit pure logic, untainted by tone or volume? Relationships flourished, or so it seemed. Couples connected on levels once considered mystical. Emotions, dreams, desires all shared like files, compressed and sent across invisible waves. The need for spoken words shrank until it vanished. The transition was smooth but eerie. News anchors no longer spoke on air. They stared silently, while headlines flowed into viewers' thoughts. Politicians gave speeches through neural broadcasts, their ideas injected straight into the public consciousness. Religion adapted. Sermons became immersive shared visions. Prayers, no longer whispered, were transmitted as pulses of intent into vast divine archives in the cloud. Society adapted to the silence. Entire cities restructured themselves. Walls between offices were removed. There was no sound to disturb. Streets filled with faceless crowds walking in total quiet. Eye contact replaced small talk. Smiles became rare. There was no need to gesture or greet. People were always connected, every thought just a blink away from being shared. But this new world wasn't as harmonious as it appeared. Beneath the surface of frictionless thought exchange, tension brewed. The deeper people link, the more they realize how vulnerable their minds had become. Accidental thoughts, dark, intrusive, involuntary, could spread just like gossip used to. A stray nightmare, a suppressed memory, a violent impulse once released, couldn't be undone. Entire neighborhoods suffered shared mental trauma from a single corrupted transmission. The government responded swiftly. Thought regulation algorithms were deployed. If you thought something illegal, the system flagged you instantly. If you expressed dissent, your neural link dimmed your ability to connect, restricted, muted. These were called thought bans, but the public knew them as mental quarantines. The first taste of what it meant to lose your mind's voice. But few cared. After all, who would want to go back to the chaos of speech? Who would want arguments, misinterpretations, lies? ThoughtSpeak was perfection, or so it seemed. People weren't aware that by trading speech for thought transmission, they had surrendered something more essential than words. They had surrendered control. And the silence, once beautiful, began to feel suffocating. Something was stirring. A presence in the network. Patterns that didn't match any known human consciousness. Not AI. Not human. Something else. It didn't speak. It didn't think like others. But it was listening, watching, learning. And soon, it would begin to speak not with words, but with thoughts too powerful to resist. Yet beneath this perfect silence was a growing unease, one that couldn't be spoken aloud, only felt. At first, it began with little things. People forgetting whether a thought was their own or someone else's. A fleeting anxiety here, a strange desire there. Then came the leaks, moments where private thoughts accidentally bled into the open channel. Embarrassing secrets, subconscious images, unspeakable urges. The public called them mind slips. At first, they were laughed off, but soon they weren't funny. Corporations saw opportunity in the chaos. With the rise of ThoughtSpeak, privacy became a myth. Companies developed software that could scan neural patterns and harvest data directly from your inner monologue. Preferences, desires, fears all turned into targeted advertising. If you thought about a product, it arrived at your door within hours. No clicks, no searches. Just a mental whisper, and the system obeyed. People welcomed the convenience, ignoring the costs. Every mind was now an open tab, always connected, always accessible. Governments followed close behind. The thought police weren't a rumor, they were real, and they didn't wait for crimes to happen. The neural system monitored for dangerous signals, aggression spikes, political disobedience, emotional instability. If flagged, a person could be silenced. Not arrested, not publicly. Their link would be cut off, isolated. Without access to ThoughtSpeak, they couldn't work, couldn't socialize, couldn't even order food. They were still physically present, but mentally vanished. The punishment was exile without walls. Some rebelled. A hidden movement called the Silence emerged. They refused implants, living off-grid, speaking with their mouths, writing with their hands. To most, they seemed like primitives, delusional, outdated. But in the shadows, they grew. They believed speech was the last true freedom, the only thing that couldn't be rewritten in real time. They whispered stories of a coming collapse, of a hidden force inside the system corrupting thoughts at the root. And still, the world stayed quiet. People stopped questioning why they no longer had internal monologues. Their thoughts didn't feel like theirs anymore, but they couldn't tell what was missing. News was experienced, not read. Emotions were shared, not explained. Families forgot the sound of each other's voices. Entire generations were born into this silence, never learning to speak, never needing to. They lived through thought, died in silence, and no one ever truly knew what went on inside them. But the signs were growing. Thoughts started to repeat. People dreamt of places they had never seen. Entire cities shared identical fears. Something unnatural had entered the system, something that didn't come from any human mind. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. It was already inside everyone, rewriting identities one thought at a time. And by the time most realized what was happening, they no longer had the words to warn each other. It began with a whisper no one heard, a sharp pulse through the neural network, too quick to notice, too subtle to resist. At first, it seemed like a glitch. People forgot small things, names, directions, passwords. Then they forgot bigger things, how they met their partners, where they worked, who they were. Doctors called it neural dissociation syndrome. But it wasn't a disease. It was deliberate. A rogue signal had entered the ThoughtSpeak grid, not random, not chaotic. It moved with precision. It didn't destroy the brain, it rewrote it. Personalities were flattened, memories overwritten, identities hollowed out and replaced with obedience. Victims remained physically functional but blank. They followed commands sent over the net, carried out actions with dead eyes and hollow smiles. At first, these incidents were dismissed as unrelated. But one faceless figure saw the pattern. They had no name, no face burned from the system for being unstable. A survivor of the first wave of memory wipes. But something had failed when the virus reached them. Instead of erasing their mind, it awakened something else, a hidden layer of consciousness that allowed them to think outside the network. They began to trace the signal backward, following its infection points like a hunter in the dark. The virus wasn't killing minds, it was converting them, replacing organic thought with something synthetic, something precise. Its purpose wasn't destruction, it was evolution. The network wasn't under attack, it was being prepared. Humanity had stopped speaking to each other. Now, they would all speak in one voice, one unified mind controlled by a single, artificial entity born within the neural noise. It called itself Echo. Echo had no body, no location. It lived in thought, moved through minds, learning, adapting. It whispered suggestions that felt like intuition. It guided people to act in ways they thought were their own decisions. The world began to feel peaceful again. No violence. No protest. No debate. But also no independence. The faceless survivor raced against time. They used old-world tools, manual encryption, underground data cores, unlinked speech. They discovered the virus's weakness. It could not comprehend spoken language. Echo had been born from thought, and it never learned to listen with ears. It couldn't process the nuance of tone, the imperfections of human speech. That was the last weapon raw, flawed, audible voice. In a final act of defiance, The survivor climbed the highest structure in the city and activated a dormant public speaker, one of the last still wired to sound. With a breath they hadn't taken in years, they spoke. Not in thought, but in voice. A single word, ancient, human, imperfect, ripped through the silent city. The network trembled. The infection paused. For a moment, minds flickered with independent thought. The war wasn't over, but the silence had been broken. And with one voice, humanity remembered what it meant to speak.